If you Google the word sanctuary, you'll find definitions for the word, a Wikipedia page, shelters, resorts, clothing lines, churches, and of course, recent articles about sanctuary cities and immigration. The top definition on the Google page reads, a place of refuge or safety. And that is a sermon. It'd be relevant and topical, but I think those of you who'd enjoy it listen to that sermon almost on a daily basis on MSNBC. My sermons aren't supposed to reinforce the opinions of each of our respective echo chambers. My task on the Bima is to try to force us to think from a Jewish perspective in a non-Jewish world, to push us past our position of safe agreement into the murky world of Jewish questioning. And so when I hear God's beautiful words this week, Ve'asu li mikdash v'shachanti betocham, make for me a mikdash, a sanctuary, a holy place, and I will dwell in you. I don't think of mikdash or sanctuary in terms of a place of refuge. God doesn't say, make for me a holy space, that it will then be a safe space for you. God says, create for God a holy space so that God could then dwell in us. At first glance, the logic makes little sense. We would think that we create the holy place so that God could dwell inside the holy place. But we create the space, we create the mikdash, the sanctuary, to penetrate our souls, to imbue us with the divine, to make a lasting impression on us and the world. Reflect on our lives. Consider holy spaces, big and small, that allow godliness to impact us as Jews. I think of this room. I think of the state of Israel. I think of the dinner table. I think of schools. I think of cemeteries. I think of places that connect us to the Jewish tradition of the past, the present, and the future. We are connected to these places. We draw God and Torah and our understanding of the world from these places. We derive our identity from these places. We physically mark the world, and by doing so, we mark our souls. And so over the past 45 days, when we've seen the desecration of 3 Jewish cemeteries in St. Louis, Philadelphia, and most recently in New York, and when we've seen over 80 bomb threats reported against Jewish community centers and 8 Jewish schools, there is no other way to say this than plainly and simply, our very Jewish identity is under attack. This week in Indiana, a synagogue found a bullet hole in its window. Thank God nobody was injured. The FBI immediately opened an investigation as a hate crime. To the best of my knowledge, through this whole process of 45 days, only 2 arrests have been made in the country. One was a white supremacist in South Carolina who allegedly was trying to buy guns to open fire in a packed synagogue. And the second, yesterday morning, was a man in the St. Louis area. Authorities believe he's responsible for roughly 8 of the bomb threats to JCCs across the nation. So if you're keeping count, that's 3 cemeteries desecrated, more than 80 bomb threats, 1 shooting, only 2 arrests. And this week, it reached us here in Los Angeles. There was a bomb threat called into the West Side JCC on Olympic. And then this week, Westboro Baptist Church, a famous source of vitriolic hatred in this country, held a protest across from Shalhevet High School. Now I'm going to quote from Westboro's website, and I'm sorry I have to use this language, but this is a direct quote from their website, godhatesfags.com. And I quote, "Westboro Baptists will bring gospel of peace to Jewish youth on the eve of Ta'anit Esther," end of quote. And I quote again, "God has promised a day that, as the Jewish prophet Malachi expressed, they shall burn as an oven," end of quote. If the Torah is correct, and I of course believe that it is, if holy places do draw godliness into the world, then I truly believe once an anti-Semite destroys a place that we've deemed to be a holy Jewish place, they have destroyed part of our connection with God. So you could say, new rabbi, what's new about a rabbi condemning anti-Semitism? Everybody condemns anti-Semitism. That's not what I'm doing here today. I'm standing before you condemning the American Jewish response. The day before the Westboro protest, I contacted Shalhevet and offered to gather Jewish adults from Los Angeles to stand on the sidewalk in front of the school between the protest of hate and the Jewish building. I offered to create a showing of Jewish unity so the students of Shalhevet, so that our own Jewish community could see that anti-Semites can't just show up without proud, strong Jews standing opposite them. Even standing across the street, peacefully staring them in the eyes, not afraid, would have made a statement of strength and protection for our children, for our community, for ourselves. While I waited for a response from a leader within the school community, I began texting family and friends and speaking with congregants. I was going to cancel our minyan on Monday morning and direct our regular minyan attendees to join me standing proudly in front of the school. We would use our bodies to help shield a Jewish school from the poisonous radiation of hate. Within only minutes, I had 10 people who wanted to join me. Not coincidentally, 10 is the number required to draw in the divine for a minyan. And then I received the following response from the Shalhevet community, and I quote, "Nolan, I really appreciate the offer. In consultation with LAPD, the Federation, and our security team, we're actually going to completely ignore these awful people. We're actually hosting a morning of tefillah, Torah, and chesed at an alternate site," end of quote. So I pushed back and replied with the following email, and I quote, "As a grandchild of 4 survivors, I can't look away. These people from Westboro should see proud Jews not afraid of them. I am inviting adults to come stand on the sidewalk alongside me," end of quote. And then I quickly received another email, and I quote, "I hope you will honor our request and not do so," end of quote. I sat back and I thought about it. Shalhevet has a board of directors and a community with many, many, many smart people. They've spoken with law enforcement. It's their organization. So I listened and I did nothing. Monday morning, I came to our minyan. I put on my talis and tefillin. I led Hallel and I read Torah. I stand before you today to confess, I now know it to be a mistake. A mistake I don't plan on repeating again. Kol Yisrael aravim ze lazeh. All Jews are responsible for one another, whether they like it or not. This foundational principle of Judaism is the reason why I thought a group of Jews, unaffiliated with Shalhevet, standing peacefully between the school and anti-Semites, would be the very embodiment of Torah. I'm not sure it's the only response, which is why I didn't defy the request from their community. However, I can assure you the worst possible response is to host a morning of tefillah, Torah, and chesed at an alternate site. I have 3,000 years of Jewish history to prove that such cowardice has never helped our people. If you don't have enough time for 3,000 years of Jewish history, all you have to do is focus on the last 100. 78 years ago, anti-Semites marched in Europe, and my grandparents' families and their peers were encouraged to study Torah at an alternate site. What that response on Monday revealed is no matter the time or place, a Jew can pray every day and study Torah every day and still not comprehend the basic mission of Judaism itself. Now is not the time for sermons about love. Now is not the time for community messages about solidarity. Now is the time for Jewish action. What occurred Monday outside of Shalhevet was a teaching moment. Law enforcement has an important role to play. Law enforcement concerns itself about criminality, about people breaking the law. But they don't worry about the Jewish soul. The title of rabbi means teacher. I'm worried about the Jewish soul, let's say our communal neshama. What are we trying to teach our community? What are we trying to teach our children? Have we become so timid, so impotent as a community that we can't stand up for ourselves? Have times been so good for the American Jewish community for so long that we can't even remember how to react to anti-Semitism? Must we enwrap our children in such a protective bubble that they can only see hate and discrimination when it's directed at others, but we don't want them to see when it's directed at us? Should we teach our children to demonstrate for the causes of only others, but never stand up for our own family? As Hillel, a great rabbi, said roughly 2,000 years ago, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? It's not a difficult question. If a Jew's not for himself or herself, nobody will be for them. Nobody. The answer has not changed in 2,000 years. When the executive order regarding immigration was signed, I sat with congregants and received calls about how many in our community couldn't sleep, couldn't stand the injustice. I received articles from congregants about the demonstrations for women's rights and Muslim rights. How many of us here today, or in the greater Jewish community, have lost sleep in the last month worrying about kids attending Jewish day school? Last Monday, hundreds of Jewish kids were evacuated out of a Jewish day school in Florida. How many of us thought to march? How many of us lost sleep? How many of us even knew that it happened? How many of us have called law enforcement or the Justice Department or the White House and asked why there have been practically no arrests whatsoever? How many of us think about security for Jewish institutions and call our local Jewish institutions and offer to help the increased security efforts? If you're disappointed in your answers to my questions, then we have to do better. Our children should not be as sheltered from this new reality. The Torah demands that we educate our kids about the real world, that we reveal to them the hate and oppression in the world, especially the darkness and the hate that's directed toward our own Jewish family. Because only then can they appreciate the light and the love. Only then can they sense a world of possibility. I worry about the lesson being taught to children who must evacuate their schools to study Torah at an alternate site. We're failing ourselves. The American Jewish community is failing itself today. Don't kid yourselves. Monday morning at Shalhevet will be dismissed by many in the Jewish community as a non-event, as only a mere tremor not felt by many at all. Perhaps you were at Starbucks, or perhaps you were at a Rosh Chodesh Minyan reciting Hallel. I can assure you that dismissing Westboro Baptist Church is simply inviting more such of these non-events until they manifest into events as we witnessed in St. Louis, in Philadelphia, in New York, and in Evansville, Indiana. Last Monday wasn't a non-event. It was a ringing alarm that awoken my soul. And what happened to us when a Jewish cemetery is actually destroyed? Muslim leaders start a Kickstarter campaign and raise the money and are lauded as good neighbors. It was, in fact, an amazing gesture. But where were you? Where was I? Shame on us that our neighbors have to rebuild our holy places. Shame on us that we don't immediately step forward and do it ourselves. Ve'asuli mikdash v'shachanti betocham. When our holy places, our sanctuaries, our cemeteries are destroyed, we must use God to find the strength to rebuild, and to rebuild in a way that honors the memory of those buried in that cemetery and the future of those being raised in that community. I stand here warning you today, as Chaim Nachman Bialik warned world Jewry in his poem, The City of Slaughter. If we don't care enough to stand up and help ourselves, to fix our own sanctuaries, to teach pride to our own children, and rekindle the spark of Torah in every Jew, if we don't care, then we are in serious, serious trouble. Next week, 1 week from today exactly, we'll come together as a community to celebrate the holiday of Purim. And in the Megillah, we'll read about Haman's intention to destroy the Jewish people and Mordechai and Esther's heroism. What would have happened if Mordechai had decided to shield Esther from the truth? What would have happened if, God forbid, Mordechai had decided or had been advised not to respond, not to take action, but rather to host a morning of tefillah, Torah, and chesed at an alternate site? I can assure you, we wouldn't be around next week to celebrate Purim at all. The Torah teaches us that we have to defend our family before we can ever defend others. Abraham has to fight warlords for Lot's freedom before Abraham can argue with God. Moses has to physically fight an Egyptian taskmaster before he can bring God's judgment on Pharaoh. I will not bury my kids' heads in the sand any longer. If we don't anchor our kids' identities in the truth with a strong Jewish compass, they can attach or detach from any universal cause. The only way to walk through the universal world is through a strong, particular grounding. And I argue that the best compass for any Jew is the one designed specifically for us. It's the Torah. Next week on Shabbat morning, we will read Parshat Zachor and fulfill the mitzvah of remembering Amalek, how they attacked the most vulnerable amongst us. And then after Shabbat is over, we'll have Purim and read Megillat Esther and celebrate our ability to stand up for ourselves. Don't take this time of year lightly. Allow the news of what's happening to our American Jewish family to affect you deep inside. It's serious. It's more serious than Jewish community leaders are willing to say publicly. Let's call our congresspeople. Let's call our senators. Let's call our White House. Let's call our local police department. Let's hold them all responsible. But even more important than that, let's hold ourselves responsible. And let's be ready, because I'm no longer willing to recite Hallel and read Torah at an alternate site. I'm going to stand up and be a proud Jew in the face of hatred when it presents itself. And I'm going to ask all of you to stand by my side. I look forward to standing side by side with you to defend our holy religion, all of our holy spaces, and most importantly, our holy people. Shabbat Shalom.